Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to a bonus episode of Harpin On Rugby. Joining me to look back over the Irish men's under-20s campaign at the World Championships in South Africa is the very same person who helped me preview it a few weeks ago. He's making his fourth appearance on the pod, and he goes by the name of Ball Handling Hooker. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
Indeed, good to have you. Okay, so we've come to the end of yet another World Championships. The under 20s just finished up last Friday. Ireland had a sort of an interesting route. It started off really, really well, and the results kind of went sort of downhill from there. What did you make of it, sort of overall, as a result for the Irish team?
Um, I thought it was positive. I think the minimum expectation we had going in was that Ireland should get into the semi-finals. They did that. After that, it's almost look at the draw. They ran into the eventual champions, and what can you do? You come up against a bigger side on the day, and that happens. They by no means did they embarrass themselves against England either. So it was one of those things. And as you said, like they started off the tournament against Italy with an exceptional performance. Like we cast our mind back into the Six Nations, and they needed a try in the last 5 minutes to beat Italy, and now they're beating them by 50 points or putting 50 on them, whatever it was, and playing some outstanding rugby at the same time. I think the trajectory after that maybe looks a little bit worse because one of the games was called off, and they didn't get a chance to show what they can do against Australia. I do think, having watched the tournament, that they probably would have beaten Australia, and maybe that would have helped them face somebody else in the semi-finals. But look, um, they got into the last four. The seeding for next year is secure and it's good, and this won't be the last time we'll see most of these players.
Yeah, I mean, just to go through the results kind of in order, like you say, they started with that 55-15 win over Italy in the first game, and it really looked like it was a performance like almost one I dare say that we've kind of gotten used to over the past 2 or 3 years. I mean, they really they really ran them over, especially like you say, compared to how things went in the Six Nations just a few months ago. Then they came up against Georgia, and it's interesting because like this there's a lot of talk in rugby, of course, at the senior level, the Six Nations, about promotion, relegation, and the four against. And it's ironically, it's at the under 20s where they do have this. And you see teams like Georgia, the teams that succeed in the trophy, they get promoted into this. So you've got teams like Georgia and Spain as well are involved in these tournaments now because they've earned it by getting promoted from the trophy. And we came up against Georgia, and we very nearly lost. It took a last minute try. It was a very spirited performance from Georgia. But then on the other hand, I mean, we were really determined to get that try at the end. It was almost like we weren't getting out of there without coming out on top.
Absolutely, and especially for this class of players, the grit that they had throughout the entire year was on show in that Georgian game. Nothing was dead, nothing was over, and it felt like they had full belief in themselves the entirety of the full game to get the result. Like they even started that game on fire. They got the first two tries, and it looked like it was going to be great before Georgia are no mugs themselves. They've been at this level. Well, not this class, but they've been very good at the last 6 or 7 under 20 years, and have beaten Ireland before. Um, Look, I think it's a when you look at it on paper, it probably doesn't look great, but I think it's a result that will stand to some of these players, and the grit and determination that they showed to pull it out in the end will only serve them well going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for the third match in our pool, we had Australia, and like you say, that was called off because I mean, I've never been to Cape Town myself, but everyone I've said that July, if you're going to pick a month to play any tournament in Cape Town, that is probably the worst time to do it. And in many ways, they were lucky that only one match in the whole tournament had to be called off because of it. But it was ours, and they made the decision to award 2 points each. And what the way that transpired is we got ourselves into the semifinals. But where we came right up against our old friends England, and that semifinal was, I mean, on paper we stayed within 11 points of them, but it was really at the set piece where that made the difference.
Yeah, and like I wouldn't say that Ireland had a bad scrum. Yeah, it was probably closer to average, but England's scrum was exceptional. Like their two props. We all saw that England had issues. The senior team had issues at scrum time this summer, but I think that can be resolved very quickly with just the promotion of some of these kids. They are monsters, and it wasn't just the Irish scrum that they were destroying. It was the South African scrum. It was the New Zealand scrum. It was France. It was tour de force, and without that, they don't win the tournament, and
Hmm.
arguably may not even have got into the semi final. Now, I might be kind of stretching that a little bit, but um, that was the difference in the game. Uh, it was a good performance from Ireland, though. They really started very strong. They held the lead for the first 20 minutes. One of the things that came out of the Six Nations that had me worried outside of the scrum was their defense. It kind of felt like bigger, stronger players were able to mow through some of their tackle attempts, which look, that happens at under 19s and under 20 levels. But whatever systems that they had in place and the training that they've done, the Irish defense was exceptional for the entirety of the game against England. Um, and England just played smart. They kept the ball and didn't let the Irish players do anything with it. And unfortunately, that was kind of the end of our hopes. I do think if we had more possession, we could have won the game, but England didn't let us have it. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was a real momentum killer, those scrums. I mean, like even if we like when we attacked one of their lineouts maybe and got into it and forced a maul, and then it was we killed their attack, but that would result in a scrum, which was kind of almost put us on the back foot again. So that kind of kept happening, but still, like you say, it wasn't all bad. We showed we did well to stay in it. We were able to take chances, create our own chances, and like stayed within 11 points to them with that kind of dominance they had at a set piece. I mean, a lot of other teams would have been just blown off the face of the earth with that kind of constant penalties every scrum, no matter who had the put in. So you could say they did well to stay with them. And of course, the way this tournament works is that even though we lost the semifinal stage, every team is guaranteed 5 matches, weather permitting, in these tournaments. So there was still the third place playoff to be played, and that was against New Zealand, and that was a bigger defeat in the end. But we still, there were still some good performances and a couple of good scores in that as well.
there was, yeah, definitely good scores. I'd say the first 35 minutes, Ireland were phenomenal, and to be honest, I think they should have had the game done and dusted by that point. After 33 minutes, they're 12-0 up, and probably should have had more points. Yeah, the next 40 minutes were probably the worst 40 minutes that this class had in its entirety. I have absolutely no idea what happened.
Mm.
Without having seen any of what they had produced in any of other games, you would question, you know,
They were going straight up the middle,
yeah,
and like over continuous, just all of a sudden. It was like there were yellow cards and all that kind of stuff in the midst of all that, but still, it was it wasn't what we'd seen up to that point defensively. That's for sure.
absolutely. And look, it is a third, fourth place playoff, so maybe their minds aren't on it, and it's their last game, and
Mm.
some holidays are on the brain. So it was an out of character 40 minutes. Let's put it that way. And then of course, kind of adding salt to the wounds by getting two cracking scores in the last 3 minutes to make the score a little bit closer. But at that point, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, but the whole reason every team gets guaranteed 5 points is because, or 5 matches, is because it is a development competition, and it's not so much about winning it. And you talk about all the different countries and stuff, but obviously it's a different set of players each and every year by definition, and it's just about getting them game time, getting them experience going on a tour, getting playing international level, putting on the jersey, all that stuff, and it'll stand to them. And I suppose you could say maybe with this particular Irish under-20s setup over the past 2 years, we kind of been spoiled with the results we had. We did the Grand Slams, and then getting to the final last year and all that stuff. But it's good that it's good that they have this experience, and we in some ways you'd almost be more confident. I don't know about New Zealand so much, but in the England team, you'd have more confidence that those Irish players will start to see them putting in performances for the provinces a lot sooner, and we'll see a lot more of those names in the next 2 years. A lot of times, the English players, they don't pan out as much in as much quantity as the Irish do. But sure, that's going down the line. Let's get more specific now about players. From this particular Irish team, I mean, over the 4 matches as it was, what players stood out for you?
I almost feel like a broken record coming on this podcast and just saying the same names over and over again. But there were 2 players that stood out for Ireland. Both of them are on senior provincial contracts already, so it's almost expected of them. But I thought Hugh Gavin was fantastic last year in the Six Nations. I thought he was even better in this year's Six Nations, and I thought he took yet another step in this tournament. For me, he was Ireland's best player. Everything positive, attacking or defence, came through him. Whenever Ireland needed a spark, it was Hugh Gavin making a break or a half break and an offload. He was outstanding. It's no surprise that Connacht have him on a senior contract, and it'll be very exciting to see him in coming years. He's got a big task ahead of him, because there's Cal Ford and Bundy Aki, and there's no shortage of talent in the Connacht backs, but I think Hugh Gavin is one that's been earmarked for big things. The other player on a senior contract is Brian Gleeson down in Munster, and I thought he was outstanding again. Like, anytime he's played for Ireland under 20s, he's been almost the best player on the pitch. He looked that much better and had a bit more nous to him after all the senior appearances he's had with Munster. And he's the sort of player that you could see going on the Emerging Ireland Tour, or even touring with Ireland next summer during the Lions when some of the senior players are away. But he's a big one to look out for.
Yeah, the thing about those 2 players that you mentioned is that we were wondering, when that Australia game was postponed or cancelled, actually, we were wondering, well, does that help or hinder? Because with 5-day turnarounds, that's a lot for any rugby team to do. So you might think it might be an advantage for us to have the extra rest, but actually, in our case, that first match against Italy, neither of those 2 players were picked to start, and that was obviously a plan for the tournament. So I'd say they would have been sort of expected to be ready for that Australia match and go heavy for that and get a good game into the legs there. And they were denied that, and then they had to go out and play England in the next match. So that probably played a factor as well in that. But other players as well. I thought Ben O'Connor at full back was very impressive.
Yes, you could definitely see his talent like the whole way through this campaign. I thought he might have been a little bit raw in the Six Nations, but he just stepped it up another level this summer, and you can tell like this guy is a really high ceiling. His boot is huge. He is fearless. He'll go into anything and run at anything, and he's the exact type of player that will put bums on seats.
Yeah.
You'll pay to watch him. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's got a lot of confidence. He's one of those players who, especially in under 20 levels, the one thing they're pressed about Ireland is that they're good at their systems, and you see that they're learning their systems and how to play together, and all the cohesion and stuff we keep hearing about. But he's the kind of player who can do that extra and make something out of nothing. Like, instead of like when the ball's kicked deep, he would start an attack from out of nowhere, something that wasn't kind of pre-planned kind of thing, and gets us back on the front foot. He's that kind of player.
Oh, he's got that strength from hurling as well. Like, I think for the second try against New Zealand, he broke through 2 or 3 tackles that no other player on the Irish team, bar maybe Gavin or Gleeson, would have. And that's what created the try in space for Murphy in the corner. I do want to give credit to Jack Murphy and then the 2 other Ulster-bound academy centres in Willem de Klerk and Sam Berman. Those 3 were very good as well. I think I praised Jack Murphy in the preview. He just seems to make the right decision at the right times, and it's very similar for Berman and de Klerk. they can pick lines, they can put people in space. They seem to have everything, and they look small, but they pack a punch in defense as well. So it'll be interesting to see the three of them go up north and how well they can do.
Yeah, and of course Berman, he helped himself to a hat trick in that first win over Italy as well. So yeah, good displays all around, and a lot of names coming through the ranks there. We'll see them at the provinces soon. I suppose the next thing is that, of course, we'll roll on now, and we won't really be thinking there might be some provincial under-20s now before Christmas, but you're talking about next season's Six Nations. Are there any players maybe that might be held over that will still be qualified for the 2025 side?
Yeah, so traditionally Ireland aren't a country that have too many players who play for 2 years in under 20s unless they're tend to be very good. It's usually two or three players. Next year we'll be going into the under 20 campaign with 9 players who have under 20 experience, which is fantastic. And now not all of that could be just named in the squad, or it could be starting experience, but that's very exciting from that point of view. And especially when you look at some of the names like Alex Usmanov and Henry Walker are starters in the front row in the Six Nations. They're both coming back. Alan Spicer and Billy Corrigan in the second row, they have many games of experience, and Spicer was one that consistently held up and looks in the mold of a Joe McCarthy. I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but he's got that raw size and power that Irish forwards don't usually have. And it's very interesting that a lot of the current under 19s that have experience all seem to be in the forwards as well. So that's something that will bode well for them next year in various competitions, especially when we look at the under 19s, and their strength seems to be in the back as well, in the backs. So it's shaping up to be a very nice, very good year. And in addition to that, there are 5 players who are in academies already who weren't in those squads to add to that talent. So it's shaping up very nicely.
Definitely a lot to look forward to there. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just add a quick shout out to the Irish women's under 20s as well, because I mean, up to this year that team didn't really exist at all, and they had a summer series against, it was sort of a mini kind of Six Nations kind of thing. They had 2 defeats, but then they had a big win over Scotland in their final match, and it was just good that team exists. I think that's the most important thing. Everything that's going to improve the pathway to the Irish women's team is a good thing. And I think Niamh Briggs led that side, and it was good that they had that run out in those 3 matches. Those were kind of played around the same time as the men's, and it's good to see that to see some age grade rugby going for the women as well. But just going back to the men's, I suppose we should have a quick chat on the final. I mean, we got to the final last season. That was against France. It was a big French side that kind of blew us away in that final as well. But they went up against England this time, and it went the way of the English.
It did, yeah. It wasn't the running rugby that we saw last year, but it was almost the same case of the semi-final. England are just massive, and they stormed through, and their scrum really was the difference in the game. Like, the French have running rugby. They had a delicious try that was ruled out for a knock on. Justifiably so. It was definitely a knock on, but it's one of those things that you go, oh, it's almost so beautiful, you need to just let it go. And they didn't get another sniff of the try line until the 80th minute to wrap it up. And in between, just the English wrestled them into submission, and it was a very English DNA type of win, and it bodes well for a lot of their forwards.
Yeah, it was worthy winners for sure. It was definitely a good year for them in the age grade. We'll see if they can bring that success to their senior team in the next couple of years. Well, listen, just one last question. I didn't say this to you before, but we did, when we did the preview, we talked about all these law trials that they were going to do. Do you have any opinion on how they panned out? There were a lot of them, a lot of rule changes to remember and to get used to over this tournament. Did any of them seem like they're worth continuing?
I was unexpectedly pleased about the mark from the kickoff. I thought it was very interesting to see a lot of teams use it whenever the ball came within the 22, and it kind of almost forced teams to kick short of that. So I guess I wasn't fully expecting so much nuance to be there, but I think that's a good rule that's worth using. I was a little bit. I think we discussed the crooked throw as well. A little bit disappointed to see that not really called all that often. Like there were still referees that were saying, "Oh, that's crooked," even though no one went up. But it is what it is. And of course, some of those red cards are. It was more annoying than it should have been.
Yeah, it was an interesting trial, right? There was one incident with the with that mark where the French, I think it was an early one of the pool matches, the French guy, he caught it, and he marked, but then what did he do? He let the maul form around him. Did you see that? He let the maul form around him, and then they just cleared it anyway. I wasn't sure exactly what he was doing with that, but he was probably trying to see what could he catch the other team out. But it was interesting to see the way the trials worked out. But anyway, listen. That's brilliant. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you'd like to follow Ball Handling Hooker on X or Twitter, his handle is at BHHooker. We'll hope to have you back on again soon. Thanks, man.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And that's it for now. As ever, you can keep up with all of our content at harpinonrugby.com, as well as across all the social media platforms. Please help us out by commenting, liking, sharing, and subscribing wherever you can. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.